Women work in cycles. Our hormones shift week to week. Our energy shifts, our mood shift, our creativity shifts. This isn't a weakness, it's our biology. The creative lifestyle is not cycle proof. It's linear. It runs on deadlines and gigs and auditions and invoices. It runs on when the opportunity lands, not when our bodies feel ready. We have to pay bills. We have projects that end suddenly. We have opportunities that fall through, and sometimes the big break shows up the same week we're exhausted, cramping, or barely holding it together hormonally. And that tension is very real. Some women are navigating endometriosis, PCOS, painful cycles, hormonal imbalances, and still expected to operate in a society that was largely built around male biology rhythms. Add to that the instability of creative work, inconsistent income, late nights, chronic stress, never knowing when the next check or gig is coming, and it can create even more disconnection between our bodies and the lives we're trying to build. This conversation matters because so many women and girls were never actually taught how their bodies work. We weren't given language for our mood shifts or energy fluctuations. We were told we were dramatic, too emotional, too sensitive, instead of being taught that our bodies are responding exactly as they were designed to. When you don't understand what's happening, you can't support it. Today's conversation is about understanding our hormones, learning to listen instead of overriding, and exploring how we can support our bodies holistically and intelligently while still pursuing meaningful work. I'm really glad that I don't have to carry this conversation alone, because while I can speak to the creative side of this, the deadlines, the stress, the instability, the pushing through, I am not a doctor and I don't want to pretend to be. So I'm really excited to have Dr. Gordon here with us.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Can you share to listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a career mom first and foremost, but I am also a double board certified urogynecologist and reconstructive pelvic surgeon, OBGYN, and certified menopause practitioner. I also have specialized training in functional medicine, herbal medicine, sleep science, and nutrition coaching because I truly believe in holistic women's healthcare. And so I combined all of those skill sets, expertise in order to provide the care to women that I feel like they need and deserve.
My goodness. The
Yeah.
list, your credibility, you just kept going.
I know. Sorry.
Yeah. Where
Sorry,
did
not
you, no,
sorry.
don't apologize. I was like, that's so cool. I love that. Where did
Yeah.
you start your training at? Like, what was your first thing that you spent, like, trained in?
Yeah. So after medical school, I went to residency for obstetrics and gynecology at Emory University. I went to medical school at Penn State. And then while I was in residency, I realized that obstetrics was not for me. That was not really what I wanted to do long term. And I fell in love with urogynecology, which is a subspecialty that focuses on pelvic floor disorders.
Mm.
Within the female pelvis, it's a bowl full of muscle, and all of those muscles support not only the pelvic organs, but the abdominal organs up to the diaphragm. And that is our core support. And there are so many things that unfortunately can go wrong when you lose that support, when you have pelvic floor muscle weakness or you have muscles that are really tight. And so my subspecialty, urogynecology and reconstructive pelvic surgery, which is my specialty that I went to fellowship for, that's my primary focus.
Nice.
But I still also provide gynecologic care. So that's your typical preventative screening from your pap smears or dealing with any acute issues within the female pelvis. And I do dibble dabble in some obstetrical stuff, primarily preconception counseling and then postpartum care, especially for women who've had severe tears after a vaginal birth.
Mm.
But yeah, I went to fellowship for 3 years for urogynecology, and then that's my main focus now.
Wow. And you have your own practice, correct?
I do.
Yes.
Brand
Tell us more about
new.
that.
brand
Yeah.
brand spanking new.
Awesome.
So I was practicing urogynecology and reconstructive pelvic surgery for 5 years with a medical group, and I've always wanted to have my own practice, but coming out of fellowship, I knew I needed to get my feet wet. I had to figure out the world, start making some money, just get comfortable and confident in my skill set.
Mm,
And I gave them 5 years and then said, "Okay, it's time to fly." I resigned in November of 2025, and then I now have Journey Well MD, which is a modern, holistic women's health practice that focuses on helping busy women, career moms, prioritize their health and well-being without guilt.
mm.
Um, so it's gynecologic, urogynecologic, and wellness care.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And when you say holistic, tell us kind of the difference between your approach and a traditional medical approach to treatment or health. Yeah.
Yeah, so right now in the, traditional it's really called, the conventional healthcare system because
Okay.
traditional medicine is more, you think about Chinese medicine, that's defined
Mhm.
as traditional medicine, but, in our conventional healthcare system, it's really challenging to provide holistic care to any patient because of the time constraints and the business side of the healthcare system. They want you to see as many patients as possible. Um, and it's almost like a conveyor belt.
Mm,
And so you end up seeing what I found is I ended up seeing, women for the same thing over and over again because we just really didn't have the time to get down to the root issue. And then
mm,
also within the traditional healthcare system, we compartmentalize everything. Instead of
mm,
looking at the whole person, we whatever symptom you have, it's like, okay, you need to go see this specialist and then go see that specialist and then
mhm.
this specialist. And then within that system, no one's talking. Like no
Right.
one's actually paying attention to what this specialist and that specialist said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so with Journey Well MD, I am focusing on the whole woman because something
Mm,
that's interestingly enough happening within your pelvis could be impacting what's going on in your brain, various organ systems. I'm not going to name all of
yeah.
them, just like whatever is going on, up top could be affecting down below. In a physical sense, the practice focuses on the whole person, but also the mental, emotional, spiritual, all of that also matters because I
Wow.
always say the mental manifests into the physical. So
Mm,
if you have, and I know we're going to talk about it, like a
mhm,
lot of pain conditions can end up affecting you mentally. And then that mental, um, whatever you're feeling mentally can then actually exacerbate the pain that you're feeling.
mm,
So my practice just focuses on you, not just your pelvis, not just your vulva, not just,
yeah.
you know, your bladder, but I'm
Mhm,
focusing on you and how
mm,
can we get you better? And then time. It's not rush visits. It's
mm,
personalized care. Um, and I'm in it for the long haul. How can I
yeah.
help you journey well through life rather than just dealing with this acute issue?
That's so important. I have been on a journey to learn more about my own body and my hormones. And um, I actually was just recently diagnosed with endometriosis. And
Mm.
so, like, learning more and more about how, the whole of your life fully impacts your body, right? Like how much you sleep, how much you eat, what you eat, how you move, how you are mentally. Like you said, all of that directly impacts the body. And um, like you said, conventional medicine doesn't necessarily allow for all of that to be taken into account when given a diagnosis or something like that. So that's
Mm.
really cool that you've now started a practice that focuses on all of those things as well. Um, a lot of the people listening might not know a ton about the basics of the woman's body.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily taught in schools, sadly, and a lot of moms, because they weren't taught, also don't teach their children, and so it's a cycle of not knowing. And I think it's really great with this conversation and talking more about how the creative lifestyle can be impacted by what's happening in your body, to know the basics. So when it comes to the menstrual cycle, what is it? How long is it? What is happening in it? All of those things. Can you tell us the basics?
Yeah, for sure. So, um, our menstrual cycle as a woman is for many women, they look at it as, your arrival into what's to become your journey through womanhood.
Mm,
Because that's really when your ovaries, they're alive, they're talking, and it's not really just your ovaries, but it's a whole miraculous connection between your brain, and then there's a gland called the pituitary gland, your adrenals, and then your ovaries, that whole beautiful cascade that communicates, so that you can start to develop into the woman that you're going to be emotionally, physically, mentally, so on.
yeah,
So I I feel like that was more of like a philosophical way to introduce it, but I guess I'm geeking out, like, because this is what
I love
I
that.
I love, but,
Yeah.
from a simplistic standpoint, it's really when the ovaries start to wake up, and the ovaries are the reproductive or, sex organ for a female. And the ovaries produce the most important hormones for a female, which is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And so when your ovaries wake up, that's now when you start to have a menstrual cycle. And the menstrual cycle is marked by your period. So the duration can be anywhere from 28 to 35 days. It can range, but it's cyclic in that your period or your cycle is going to come around the same time for you every month, give or
Mhm,
take, a couple of days.
mhm,
And that is dependent on, or it relies on, your ovaries responding appropriately to your brain and your pituitary gland to produce the estrogen and progesterone that's necessary to make that happen. There's two phases, or I'd say there's three phases to your cycle. There's the follicular phase, which is dominated by estrogen. There's ovulation, which is a release of a dominant egg waiting to be fertilized by sperm, if you're trying to get pregnant. And then there's the luteal phase, which is dominated by progesterone. So I'll stop there.
yeah. I love that. So what you're saying is a full menstrual cycle. I think a lot of people think their menstrual cycle is just when they bleed, but it's actually 28 days, 28 to 30 days, give
Hmm.
or take. And what is happening is there are main phases that happen throughout it. Like you said, the follicular, ovulation, luteal.
Hmm.
And then typically luteal is when you bleed, correct?
So beginning of your follicular phase is actually when you bleed.
Ah,
So I'd
okay.
say the follicular phase is the active phase.
Hmm.
So in the beginning, your estrogen levels are low
Mhm.
and your period starts.
Okay.
And the lining inside the uterus, that you shed to have your period, like that lining it's leaving, it's shedding.
Yeah, yeah.
And then as you're having your period, like you're bleeding, a dominant egg, because you have hundreds of thousands of eggs in your ovaries, there's a
Mhm.
dominant egg that's being selected to mature so that it can be released from the ovary, and that's ovulation.
Okay.
And then after ovulation is when you have the luteal phase, and that's actually the sleepy phase.
Hmm.
And your body is actually storing energy in preparation for possible implantation of a fertilized egg.
Yeah, I would love to talk more about the energy within those different phases of the cycles. You
Hmm.
said luteal is typically the low energy phase. Does that
Hmm.
mean follicular is the well, if you're bleeding, it's still probably a little bit low, but then as estrogen rises again, is that when the energy comes back or what? Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yes, exactly. What's going to allow that dominant egg to continue to grow is the rise of estrogen. So, initially in the beginning of your follicular phase, you're going to feel pretty crummy. I mean, most women do when they're on their period, whether it's from, you're uncomfortable, you're irritable because of the bleeding,
Mhm.
and then your estrogen levels are also low.
Mm,
But then as your estrogen starts to increase, then you start to get your energy back. And right around the time of ovulation is typically when women feel their best because their energy is high and they're also aroused. Why?
mm,
Because you've just ovulated and so you're like, "Ooh," your body's like,
right.
"Okay, I'm interested. I want
Mhm.
something,"
Yeah,
because there's an egg that's
right.
available and it's trying to be fertilized. So around that
Mhm.
time, it's like the active, I'm feeling good phase. I have energy, but also
Mhm.
your estrogen is high and then your progesterone is also starting to increase.
Yeah.
But then after ovulation, your estrogen levels kind of stabilize and then progesterone takes over, because
Mm,
if that egg is fertilized by sperm and as it starts to turn into an embryo, you need progesterone to actually stabilize the lining inside the uterus, because I'll say estrogen is what's going to cause the lining of the uterus to grow. So in
mm,
the beginning of the follicular phase, you have your period, you shed that lining. Estrogen starts to rise, you start feeling good, and then the rise in estrogen actually causes the uterine lining to thicken,
mm,
and then you ovulate. Then you come over to the luteal phase, progesterone starts to rise, estrogen starts to stabilize, and the progesterone stabilizes the uterine lining, but also progesterone is a sleepy hormone. It's a calming hormone.
mm,
And it's physiologically or from an evolutional standpoint, that's when women want to rest. They
mm.
want their energy kind of goes down.
Yeah.
Why? Because now you're trying to potentially have that embryo, if you were got pregnant, to implant into that uterine lining that was stabilized by the progesterone, and now you want to give all your energy to this potential embryo that's going to turn into a baby. And so during the luteal phase, some women can, I know me, I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm
me
like
too.
myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to do too much strenuous stuff is annoying.
Mhm.
I don't feel like it. And so, and that's why. It's because of
Wow.
the progesterone.
The human body is so wild. Like,
Mhm.
to have all of that happening, and it's crazy because on the outside, all we're thinking is like, "Oh, I'm really sleepy. Like, I need a coffee," But like on
Mhm.
the inside, it's like, "I must protect this egg," and like I must stick it. It's like crazy that all of that is happening.
Mhm.
Um, on the inside, I wonder, like, I think it could be really cool to explore the conversation of how a creative who has to be consistently kind of outputting or creating new things and having energy for the project that might have come in the midst of their luteal phase or whatever. If like a woman is tracking their cycle, when can they expect to have maybe the most energy for creative opportunities or things of that nature? I know you said the luteal dips and we kind of get a little bit more energy in the midst of the follicular and ovulation phase.
Mhm.
Are there phases that kind of lend themselves to creative work versus resting? I know you mentioned luteal, but I'd love to explore that more.
Mhm. Yeah, so your personality is important to consider with this situation.
Mhm,
I'd say, from a physiologic standpoint, based on your estrogen levels, you would think that you're going to be most creative, most stimulated after your period
mhm,
as your estrogen levels are rising. But for some, you may find that you're still pretty creative during your luteal phase if
mhm,
you enjoy the quiet. If you feel more aligned or more in tune with yourself
When you're
without the
calm.
noise, yes, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
calm and,
Yeah.
you're kind of by yourself in your own little cocoon. Um,
Mhm.
so I think it really just depends on, like, you and
Mhm.
how you function.
Yeah.
Um, but if you and then I also would say, where are you in the project? Are
Mm.
you trying to come up with an idea,
Mhm.
or are you trying to bring an existing idea to the finish line?
Yeah.
I think when you're trying to finish something, maybe your luteal phase is gonna be tough because you're gonna lack
Mhm.
motivation, but if you're trying to birth an idea, maybe that calm, quiet, that sleep is gonna help,
Yeah.
you know, m fire up your brain cells. So, it just
Yeah.
depends.
That's such a good point because I think with a lot of creative product projects, sometimes you have to have reflection periods, right? It's like what's working and what isn't. And um, in your luteal phase, maybe that's like the time when like you journal or you're at home mostly and you're to yourself and you're reflecting a lot. And so it's like that would be a great time to have, kind of an audit on the creative project. And also, like you said, if you're extroverted, introverted, you might find yourself, getting energy for creative projects through people. And maybe your luteal phase isn't when you want to do that because you're wanting to rest and sleep and be to yourself.
Mhm,
And so maybe like follicular ovulation is like when you want to, like you said, birth a new idea because you're getting energy from all the people you're around, you're very high level,
mhm,
function. And so that is a really good point to kind of make sure you know yourself enough to know how you want to create and what type of environment you thrive in to create. I also wonder when it comes to creatives who are constantly creating and functioning and performing, they don't necessarily have the choice to say, it's my luteal phase. I'm going to, rest and recuperate. It's like, no, I have a show tonight and I'm in the midst of my luteal phase. What does that do to hormones to consistently be outputting energy even when your body may be telling you you need rest? Like, what does that do hormonally?
mhm. Yeah, so one, I mean, burnout for sure,
Mhm.
and you're not it's gonna be very difficult for you to give your body the time it needs to rest and reset.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing that I, kind of forgot to mention earlier about my approach to medicine is
Mhm.
core wellness, like your foundational wellness. And it's simple. And you mentioned it actually,
Mhm.
my core wellness framework is nourish, move, restore, connect. What you
Mhm.
eat, how you move, how you rest and restore, and how you connect with yourself and with others. And
Yeah.
so, and that's your core wellness is grounded in your what we call hormonal milieu. So,
Mm.
what your body likes, what it's used to when it comes to your balance of all of your hormones and how they work together.
Mm.
And so, if you are pushing, 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 then one hormone that's going to be chronically elevated is cortisol.
Mm.
And cortisol is your fight or flight hormone. We all need it to survive. Cortisol wakes you up in the morning, it allows you to respond appropriately to acute stressors, issues, concerns. But if it's chronically elevated, then from a physiological standpoint, it's simply going to increase your risk of diabetes, heart disease, and
Mm.
cancer.
Wow.
Um, from how you feel, it creates chronic inflammation and your body is always fighting to source energy, and your body can only try to source energy for so long until it just peters out. You're just
Right.
on E. And then from a reproductive standpoint, one of the first things to go when you're in a chronic stress, high stress state is your period, because
Mhm.
your brain says, okay, I need to focus on whatever is going on. And so the first area that does not need my attention, that does not need my energy, is the ovaries. And so
Mm,
you either start to experience irregular periods or you have no period.
mm,
It's like simply put, thinking about an athlete. I think we all, like, there's a lot of athletes that are pushing their body physically, and many of them can go months without a period because
right.
their brain, their body is having to shunt energy to other
Mm,
organ systems to keep them functioning through that chronic stress.
right.
But for a day-to-day, person, woman
Mm,
who's chronically stressed and not having a period, it's because the brain's like, she doesn't need this right now. She needs
right.
something else.
It's so interesting that a woman's body will kind of give you alerts that something's happening. I think sometimes like we're so caught up in life that we might not even realize like our shoulders are constantly to our ears and we're like stressed, but it's like suddenly you lose your period and you're like, okay, something's off. So
Mhm.
what would be kind of a woman's like red flags happening in a woman's body that's saying something is there's no alignment here when it comes to my hormones, whether that's like cortisol or estrogen, progesterone. How can you tell from an outside view that something is not aligned in a woman's body when you might feel disconnected from it internally, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I'd say number one is irritability.
Hmm.
Your and how you cope with day-to-day tasks. If you typically don't have a short fuse and then all of a sudden it's very easy for someone to push your hot button, that's a cue that
Mm-hmm.
something's not right. I'd also say simple things like your heart rate,
Mm-hmm.
your the way that your body responds to temperature changes. That's a big sign. I think GI is another big one.
Hmm.
So abdominal pain or bloating
Yeah.
that you can't explain,
Hmm.
changes in your bowel habits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so mood swings, irritability, abdominal pain, yeah, heart palpitations, feeling very anxious,
Temperature changes.
temperature changes,
Yeah.
sleep, that
Mm,
3 a.m. wake up call without an alarm.
mhm, mm,
It's hard for you to fall asleep, or you fall asleep, but then, yeah, it's hard for you to get back to sleep if you wake up. Yeah, I
mhm.
think those are the main
Red flags that
signs.
are happening.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. And I feel like those are always explained away, kind of in a way that doesn't actually connect to a woman's body. It's kind of like, oh, I had, too much coffee, so I can't go to sleep. But it's
Mhm,
like a regular thing that's happening. Or it's like, I've always had hot flashes. I've always been cold. Those type of things kind of just get explained away. Or I'm irritable because someone said this. And it's like, no, well, you're always irritable. It's
mhm,
like there you can kind of start to see rhythms and patterns happening. And I think a lot of the times we explain them off. At least in my experience with a lot of my friends, they'll be like, "Oh, it's just whatever." And as I'm learning hormonal stuff, I'm like, "Actually, I think that might be so and so." So
mhm,
those are all really good signs to look out for
mhm,
when we are trying to learn more about women's bodies and the menstrual cycle and hormones.
mhm,
I think it's important to touch on kind of words that have kind of become I don't want to say trendy, but they are coming up more and more in society as we learn more about women's bodies.
mhm,
Right now, the way they're being thrown out can kind of be scary. For example, PCOS, endometriosis, those type of words are being kind of flung around in a way that I don't necessarily think is bad, but if we're not fully educated on them, can be scary to just hear like, oh, I think it's like I don't know the specific statistic, but 1 in 10 women experience yada yada. It's like all of a sudden, oh, do I experience that? I have some of these symptoms, like can be a little scary. So can you briefly touch on what PCOS and endometriosis are?
So with PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, it is a condition that unfortunately we do not know what causes it. Um, but it is a hormonal imbalance that affects your period, and then also various physical characteristics that we don't typically see in women. So, one with your period, you can either have irregular periods or you can go without a period. And that's because you have high levels of testosterone.
Mm.
And although testosterone is produced by the ovaries, 50% of it is produced by the ovaries, 25% is produced by the adrenal glands, which live above the kidneys, and then the other 25% is produced in the fat cells. Although the ovary produces it, you end up having too much of it.
Mm.
And then what that ends up doing is it affects the estrogen progesterone balance, and so then your period is off.
Mm.
And then because of those high levels of testosterone, then you can start to develop something called hirsutism, which is hair growth in areas that we don't typically see in a biological female, whether it's, chin hair, sideburns, mustache, hair, not just along the chin, but beard. You can also have enlargement of your clitoris. And then on ultrasound, when they look at the ovaries, they call it like a string of pearls. So you can see all of these cysts that are at the perimeter of the ovaries. And I'd say the biggest thing with polycystic ovarian syndrome is because you're having these irregular periods or no period at all, if you desire to have a baby or get pregnant, it's challenging to do so. And
Mhm.
then with the high levels of testosterone, it goes hand in hand with insulin resistance. And so you have a higher risk of developing diabetes. Also, women with PCOS can be larger because of the insulin resistance. It affects your metabolism. It's easier for you to gain weight. But when there is something called lean PCOS, where you're on the smaller side of a normal BMI and you or body mass index, normal weight, and you still have polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Mm.
So I think historically we would always think that women with PCOS, they were of a larger size,
Mhm.
were diabetic and had, male pattern hair growth.
Mhm.
But that's not always the case. You can look completely quote unquote normal, because I hate the
Right.
word normal, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
typical what we see, and you could
Societal
still
standard.
have like PCOS.
Right. Yeah. And then on the flip side, what's the difference between PCOS and endometriosis?
Yeah. So for me, endometriosis is really a pain condition. It's essentially when the inside lining of the uterus makes its way outside of the uterus, and
Mhm.
you have these implants of that, active endometrial tissue. And those implants can be anywhere within the abdomen.
Mhm.
Most commonly, they're on the ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, but it can be on the bowel, the bladder, the peritoneum, which is the shiny tissue that coats all of your organs.
Mhm.
And because this tissue um, is active, it's hormonally reactive, it responds to estrogen. When it's stimulated by estrogen, it actually causes inflammation, and that inflammation causes pain. And then when your body or any area in your body is inflamed, it wants to heal itself. And
Right.
so it tries to heal, and through healing, it creates scar. And then that scar tissue can also cause pain because
Mhm.
scar kind of attaches to whatever it wants to attach to. With some tissue or organs within the body, it's supposed to be mobile. It's supposed to move. Like, for instance, the bowel. It
Mhm.
peristalsis or squeezes and moves like a snake all throughout the abdomen. But if it's covered in scar and it can't move, then that can cause even more discomfort.
Mhm.
So a mild case of endometriosis may present as, cyclic, which is pain. I mean, cyclic pain, which is pain around the same time every month, that
Mhm.
oftentimes is worse than your typical period pain.
Mm-hmm.
This woman may, Midol or Motrin may not touch it. She may be down for the count, have to miss school or miss work or, kind of curled up in bed for a few days
Mm-hmm.
versus you can have, your most severe type where it's cyclic pain that's extreme every month on top of a baseline day-to-day discomfort
Yeah.
with bowel movements, with urination, or even just simply with moving, with eating. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
constant chronic state of pain.
Yeah. That's crazy. Like when you think of what some women are going through and having to, show up in life like nothing's going on, it's very wild to think
Hmm.
about that. When it comes to a healthy period and a healthy menstrual cycle, are
Hmm.
you supposed to have pain? I've heard before, like, if, periods were never supposed to have pain. And I've heard people say, like, actually, that's not true. Do we actually know if a healthy period is supposed to have pain with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's going
What are
to
your
be
thoughts?
some discomfort
Yeah.
because of it's called prostaglandin. So,
Mhm.
with estrogen and it causing that lining inside of the uterus to grow, there are nerves, there's all kind of inflammatory cells, and I'm not going to get like nerdy with
Yeah.
cytokines and IL-6 and all of that, but there's
Mhm.
just innately things within that lining and tissue that if it grows and it's inflamed, and so
Mhm.
it's going to cause pain. But, severe pain or
Mhm.
pain that doesn't go away with a heating pad and a little nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory like Advil, Aleve, Motrin,
Mhm.
that that's not normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Um, how could a woman who has not been listening to their body and kind of feels disconnected from it, maybe,
Mhm.
how could they start to listen to their body again? Maybe when it tells them they need rest or they need food or like you said earlier, those signs that something's off hormonally. How can they start to listen to their body again?
I'd say like trust what your body is telling you the first time. Because from a societal standpoint, we have been conditioned to think that we have to carry it all and we have to assume all of these roles and responsibilities. I think we are conditioned to think that we need to come up with an excuse for how we feel or diminish how we feel because we've got to get whatever the task is done, or
Mm-hmm.
this person, that person, they need us. But really, we need to put ourselves first and listen to our body the first time
Mm-hmm.
so that then we can be not only who we need to be for ourselves, but then for everybody else around us. Because when we put ourselves first, everybody wins. So I always say a woman's intuition is always right.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you don't feel well, you don't feel well for a reason.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying to quit on whatever you're doing but recognize that you don't feel well. And so for that day, you may not be able to give the 150% because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like for women, our baseline, our effort is always better than
100%.
our male
Yeah.
counterpart. So
Yeah.
today you can't give 150%. You just need
Yeah.
to give 50, which is going to be
Right.
better than your counterpart. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But listen,
I totally agree.
it's like what Oprah said, like listen to, um, or wait, darn it, what did she say?
Wait.
When someone tells you who they are, listen to them
Oh,
the
listen to
first
them.
time. And so
Yes.
that's what I say for yourself. When your body is saying like, blank so and so, help,
Yeah.
stop, wait,
Yeah.
hold on. Listen to her the first time.
Listen.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. And I think even it could be like a small voice. I think like sometimes we're expecting like, suddenly you faint and it's like, oh, I need to listen to my body. It's like,
Hmm.
no, when you are feeling a little bit tired, listen. Like,
Mhm.
it's like, why push through? Like, listen to the small voice that's saying, I'm a little hungry. Go eat something. It's
Mhm.
like, don't push those little voices aside, because what ends up happening, I think, a lot of the times is we wait for the major symptom to happen. Like, we wait for
Mhm.
the period to go away. We wait um, for the fainting spells, or we wait for um, extreme hunger or extreme lack of sleep. Like, it should be the little things where it's like, actually, I don't feel like, doing cardio today. So I'm just
Mhm.
going to do yoga. Allowing yourself to listen to those small voices, I think, is really important.
Mhm.
How can women make sure that whenever they're looking at their life holistically, they are making sure to do the best for themselves? I think we could talk about this from a kind of those different pillars you were talking about that you try to hit with Journey Well,
Mhm.
food, movement, sleep. Because I think it's there are overarching themes that are consistent from woman to woman, but it might be like, somebody needs a different level of sleep than someone else. Or do you feel like it's a very blanket statement, kind of like, you should get 8 hours of sleep, you should get this much water? Like, when it comes to those things, food, movement, sleep, what's your suggestion for women?
Mhm. What I typically recommend for the individual is to define what healthy is to you.
Mm,
And whatever that definition is, then look at your life and figure out what's missing so that you can embody that definition. Because when it comes to what you eat, for instance, I believe in intentional nutrition. So, because nowadays, with all of the additives that are in our food, the preservatives, I find that so many people have so many different food allergies or food aversions, and or whether they're gluten-free, plant-based, whole 30, I mean, the list goes on and on.
yeah.
So, but when you eat intentionally, you're eating to fuel your body to feel good because food should feel good. You're eating
Mm-hmm.
for a purpose to give your body the nutrients it needs so that you can function well. So, within your definition, if whatever, health looks like from a nutrition standpoint, focus on that. I think movement, very simple. I do not think that, the whole, I think the recommendation is 150 minutes in a week.
Mm-hmm.
But for some, that is it's hard for them to fit that into their
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle. So maybe moving 10 minutes, and that's also intentional movement. Not
Mm-hmm.
just, okay, well, I went to the grocery store today. I did, I ran some errands and I walked from my car to the
Mm-hmm.
store. That sounds all good, but I don't think that's enough. I think
Yeah.
intentional movement, set a timer for 10 minutes and do whatever feels good to your body and
Mm-hmm.
try to get to 20 minutes to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and then you don't need to do CrossFit, but if you love CrossFit, fine. You don't need
Right.
to run a marathon, but if that's what you want to do, fine. But you do need to
Mhm.
move intentionally, get your heart rate up, um, for 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and stretch. And I'd say stretching, like joint mobility and strength training are
Mhm.
the top
Mm.
3, because that's what's gonna help you in the long run.
Mm.
Having good mobility, in your hips is going to matter the most when you're 70 years old and you're trying to get up from your bed.
Mm.
Um, having strong bones when you're 70 years old and trying to move about is gonna matter, a
Yeah.
lot. From a sleep standpoint, the recommendation is 8 to 9 hours. Some places say 7 to 9 as well. But I think it's how restorative the sleep is.
Mm.
That's, what matters. Having
Yeah.
good deep sleep, going through all of the sleep cycles, that's what matters more. So ask yourself when you wake up, do you feel rested?
Mm.
Do you feel ready to wake up and start the day?
Mm.
Or are you dreading getting out of that bed? And if
Right.
that's the case, we need to reevaluate.
Mm.
I think it's very individualized and it really depends on what feels good to you.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, especially since health has kind of become trendy
Yeah.
in a way. It's like, oh, this supplement is gonna do it, and I found that sleeping this amount of time works, and you should eat this, and it's like this diet is the way to go, and this exercise is the way. There's always a new thing, right?
Mhm.
And I think it when especially if you're first starting the journey towards health for yourself, it can be so easy to be like, what is the right answer? It's like
Mhm.
there's so many options. I don't know where to start. This all feels very overwhelming. And I think that question of what is health for me and what feels good for my body is a great place to start. Of like, okay, I don't know if 150 is going to be good. I also think my body would feel exhausted to work out that often.
Mhm.
150 minutes a week, then okay, let me start with 10. Let me see how my body feels with that for a week. And if it doesn't feel as though I did anything, maybe I up it to 15. And if it feels like too much, maybe I lower it to 7. It's like
Mhm.
you kind of almost test your limits in a lot of different ways. It's like, all right, I'm going to sleep for 9. Okay, that felt like too much. I'm going to do 8.5. It's
Mhm.
like you kind of just have to feel it out and see, like you said, how your body feels and what feels good for you. I think that's a great recommendation,
Mhm.
especially in the society we're in, where it's just constant noise around health.
Mhm.
I feel as though the one thing that I would love to hear from you is what would it look like for a woman to work with their cycle instead of against it, especially being in a male centered world. And like we said, the rhythms of a woman are different than the rhythms of a man. And what would you say? And this could be philosophical or actual practical, whatever you want, but I would just love for you to tell me what you feel like working with your cycle looks like.
So, number 1, if you're working outside of the home, a 4-day work week,
Mm,
hands down. And that's actually been studied
mm,
overseas, and it's been shown to increase efficiency, productivity, overall happiness because
wow.
we spend more time working than we do enjoying life, leisure, and being at home. And
Yeah.
so um that's number 1. Women giving themselves more grace and realizing that it's okay to say no. And if we allow ourselves to say no more often, unapologetically, without
Mm,
over explanation, then it will allow us to be not only more of our authentic selves, but I think be more productive and
mm-hmm,
more successful in the long run. It is a fact that women take on more tasks that do not result in promotion
mm,
than their male counterparts. We overextend ourselves continuously
mm,
without reward.
yeah.
Yeah, so if we just said no more often,
Yeah.
especially when we don't have it in us, then I think we not only do ourselves, well, but those around us.
I mean, that's powerful because if you think about it, especially with the creative world, a lot of the things that we do and the work that we take on does not lead to an increase financially, career wise, relationally. We kind of just take it on because it feels like we have to,
Mhm.
or it feels like we'll look like we're doing better than we are, or getting further than where we might be currently. I know so many of my creative counterparts who will take jobs just because they feel like they need a job and not because it actually benefits them or fuels them creatively or financially or relationally. It's kind of just like this is what you do. You take the job whether it benefits you or not because you have to work. It's like that's kind of just like falling into the rhythms of what society has told you or you feel like you have to do. And I think saying no means that first of all you're listening to your body and
Mhm.
you're listening to your mind to know that's not for me. That doesn't actually benefit me. That's not actually what I want.
Mhm.
It's taking a second to be like, I don't have the energy for this. I don't have the capacity. I don't. have the mental capacity or the time capacity
Mhm.
to actually do this. Or it's thinking, right now I'm prioritizing my health. My hormones are out of balance, and if I take this, they will be more out of balance. And so there's that practice of listening to your body and your mind to know when to say no
Mhm.
would then impact you across all levels,
Mhm.
financially, relationally, mentally, physically. Like, all of it would be impacted by your no.
Mhm.
And I think on the flip side, it's impacted by your yes, right? Like, whatever you say yes to is going to impact you health wise, and it's going to impact you um, financially and relationally. Like you
Mhm.
said, the mental impacts the body impacts the mental.
Mhm.
And whatever you do is impacting you mentally. And more than likely, especially as creatives, whatever we're doing is impacting us physically, because a lot of us are dancers and writers and performers, and all of that impacts the mind and the body. And so I think, like, for a first step for a lot of women who are, starting the journey of learning their body and being educated on it, that no is so important,
Mhm.
because it not only impacts, you know, your career and your finances, but it also impacts your health. And in saying no, you give yourself time to learn more about your body and what you need and
Mhm.
what you can say yes to that actually benefits you. So yeah, I think that's a great answer.
So I've one thing to add though is I feel like some people, especially depending on their position, or I'm thinking, with creatives as well, they feel like they are not in a position to say no. So if you don't feel like you can just flat out say no,
Mhm.
provide an alternative suggestion,
Mhm.
because whether it's a no or it's another suggestion, it's going to help that other person maybe look at it in a different way, or have a different perspective. And because I'm just thinking of, for instance, with meeting times, um, a lot of times we're having to meet in the evening and
Mhm.
have these social hours and cocktail hours and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I can't do that, whether
Mhm.
it's because I'm in my luteal phase and I feel like I've given
Mhm.
enough of myself during the day. I
Yeah.
just need to go home and relax. Or now I have other roles and responsibilities. I've given enough of myself during the day. I need to go home and be a mom. So, you
Yeah.
know, you need to socialize, or you need to have that meeting. And so you can't
Mhm.
just say no,
Right.
but, "Hey, instead, can we do this?" And maybe that'll hopefully kind of open your team's eyes, and by proxy, it's helping you,
Yeah.
put yourself
100%.
first. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's awesome, because it is true. Like, a lot of artists, if you're like, you can only have it's best for you to do a 4-day work week. They're like, I currently do a 7 and I'm barely making ends meet. So it's like, okay, in the
Mhm.
midst of your 7-day week, what, like, let's think creatively. Let's think outside the box of how you can maybe make it work a little bit better for yourself. Like, I
Mhm.
think a lot of times we feel like there has to be a major overhaul. And it's like, my entire life needs to flip on its head so that I can be healthy. It's like, no, like, you can take a 1 degree closer to, like, that version of health that you have. Like, it's
Mhm.
like, what's 1 degree, what's one step that you can do that actually prioritizes you and allows for your health to be put a little bit higher
Mhm.
than where it was before. So that's a great point.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people feel as though, to your point, that they can't speak up for themselves, or they can't even ask for help.
Mhm.
I think a lot of women feel like they have to do everything on their own, and it's like, I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I must help the people next to me, and this person relies on me, and I have to get this done, and I'm thinking of this long term. It's like juggling so many things. And I do want to say that it is never, ever, ever wrong, or dramatic to ask for help. I think it's very wise. I think it's very mature. Um, whether that looks like, asking someone for help on what tracking your cycle looks like, if it's adjusting your sleep and asking a partner or a friend to help with your kids or help with a project, like, changing how you fuel yourself with food. Maybe it's asking a dietitian to help with that, a nutritionist, like, there are so many different ways that you can ask for help, and working with someone to help your lifestyle look the way you want it to. And like Dr. Gordon said, what your version of health actually looked like is strength. And so if you're looking for support that kind of blends that medical expertise with the whole of a person approach, I highly encourage you to explore Dr. Gordon's work at Journeywell MD. As you guys heard, she's created a space where women can actually be listened to and where symptoms aren't brushed off and where care isn't one size fits all. And so, Dr. Gordon, if people want to find you past this episode, where can they look for you? Where can they connect?
Yeah. So my Instagram is JourneyWellMD. I have my website, which is www.journeywellmd.com. I'm on YouTube, same handle, JourneyWellMD. Thankfully, I was able to get it all.
No, I was like, that's impressive.
See? So it's easy. Just whether it's Instagram, YouTube, the World Wide Web, it's all JourneyWellMD.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And all of that info, if you didn't catch it, will be in the episode description. As always, I am so happy to learn with you. I am so happy to grow with you. And I will see you on the next episode of Suffering for Art.